Thank you, Andrew. It's an honor to have you here, and what a pleasure to be talking about my favorite theme, Vanderbilt sports. In context of Vanderbilt sports, having a program today with the Vanderbilt athletics. If you don't mind, let's go around the room if you can take a moment to introduce yourself. Sorry. Wow, I usually leave it on silent. Lavin, you brought the food? Hello? Hello? Yeah. Okay, I'm talking. That's my wife. Okay. She has the baklava, by the way. That's why she... Hey, Brother Tariq, then that's our head of security, Tariq Shahada. So we're not going to do active shooting trainer. I think we're safe. So no, I didn't mean to scare you. Tariq, do you mind picking the baklava? My wife is somewhere there. Yeah. Sorry, I had purchased baklava especially for y'all, but then I forgot to take it with me to work, and so it'll be here in a second. And so a great friend and classmate of mine from high school. We'll start with Josh.
I'm Josh Malkowski-Berger. Great to see everybody here.
Suzanne Petrie, glad to be here. I've been here once before.
Mara Summers, I recently moved here from Miami.
I'm Rashed Fakhruddin. It's my first time here, and I came because I got an email from Andrew.
I'm Meryl Lynn, and this is my first time, but I have been another month. This is a great treat.
Thanks.
Great series.
I'm Norm Hansen, and this is my first time in a mosque. Back in Western China, I was asked to go and pray because I had the wrong hat on.
Wow.
I'm Jalen Blue. This is my first time here at Networking Communications.
Great.
I'm Vince Darden, University School, big fan of Rashed.
Likewise, going back, big fan of Dr. Darna.
Rasan Yushi Fotre, and I've been here several times when you've opened your doors and really enjoyed being part of this community.
Thank you.
I'm Patty Ostad. It's my first time here. I'm originally from Hong Kong, and I still speak, read, and write Chinese. And it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
I'm Tracy King. Glad to be here.
Christy Hallberg. Thanks for having us.
Andrew Marinus, my first time here. Thank you everybody for coming today.
Claire Chudy, and this is the first time here for me.
I'm Norma Clifford, and it's the first time for me as well, and I'm honored to be here, and I'm just a huge fan of Andrew, so whenever he invites me anywhere, I try to go.
Amen.
I'm Kathy Garthwaite. It's my fourth time here. I've been here for other events that you've had here in the religious speak before. Also a big fan of Andrew's.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Bedrosny. This is my first time here. I'm from Dearborn, Michigan. So I have many friends who are from the community. So it's wonderful to be here.
Okay, thanks. Well, we'll go ahead and start. This presentation is kind of unique for me because although I incorporate sports into whether Islam presentations or when I speak to most of our freshmen in our district on professional life skills, and I'll tie in sports examples as well. But this is really tough. Talking about Muslim and Olympians, I really appreciate this opportunity and challenge from Vanderbilt Athletics and from Andrew. It got me thinking, and I got to come across actually one of my favorite players of all time. So what I'm called it is understanding the diversity of Islam and Muslims through the Olympics. What we normally talk about when I talk about Islam, I might have a normal format, beliefs, Muslims in America, and misconceptions. But I thought, wait, I'm not going to use that format. Let me integrate some of the message that I normally give, but through the examples of athletes. And I found that actually I enjoyed it. So I hope you can enjoy this. Ask any questions along the way. And I have no idea how long this was because I just finished it like a few minutes ago. Okay, so we're going to begin with the greetings of peace. In Islam, we greet each other by saying, Assalamu alaikum. So pretend you're at a pep rally at Vanderbilt. They just hired their new coach, Jerry Stackhouse. So what would you say with the energy? Assalamu alaikum. Okay, we have a good chance of winning one SEC game next year with that crowd support. So that just means may God's peace be with you. It's similar to the Jewish greetings of Shalom. And there's even a verse, Luke 24:36 says, Jesus stood in their midst and said unto them, peace be unto you. Or in Aramaic, it's Shalom Alaikum. So this is sort of the format. I'll talk about a little bit about my background in context with sports. Not that it's going to be very significant, but diversity among Muslims in the U.S., Islam, fitness, and sports, basics of Islam, and then understanding Islam, diversity, and challenges through 4 Muslim Olympians, Ibtihaj Muhammad, and that's where we'll also cover women in jihad, Hakeem Olajuwon, prayer, fasting, Hajj, and diversity, Dr. Islam Hamido will cover tolerance, and Muhammad Ali, social justice, and charity. And so a little bit about my background. I love sports. I played it since I was a kid. From 8th grade through 12th grade, I played 6 sports, as many sports as Tom Brady has rings. But most of it died out once I transferred from MBA to Hillsborough. In 11th grade, I was ineligible for all the other sports I played. It's not like Hillsborough is recruiting me to play sports, but we were in the same division those days. And so I ended up playing tennis, which is the least of any skill sets I have. But football was fun, basketball, still play it. In fact, I'm an Ensworth alumni, so but it used to go to 8th grade. So that's why I'm an alumni there, but I'm really a Hillsborough alumni for high school. And so they had alumni tournament. And so here are all these players after the high school was formed, and players who played in college, Tavarius and so forth. And somehow I got put into their team. We win the championship, and so in their alumni newsletter it says, blah, blah, class of 9, 12, 13, and 83. So I look like I came from the Ice Age or something. But we did win, not because of me, but we did win. These are just more pictures. NES. So I went pro now. I play for our Nashville Electric Service team. So I just realized I have no more eligibility left to play for Jerry Stackhouse because I'm getting paid. And so we did win 2 championships. We lost 2, and this year has been terrible. We hardly get people to show up to the game, so I'm about to retire, call it quits probably after the season. And then this is just, hey, my friend Josh there. We just love Vanderbilt athletics. I can't say enough. Baseball games we go, basketball, Lou Cornett, World Series, and then we just go to the black gold game, and all of a sudden we see Jordan Matthews, Jawan Williams, and Andre Hall, and so it's pretty cool. The bowl game, the College World Series, the regionals, and then we have Vanderbilt freshmen do visit here, so now it's official. They come to the athletic department and they take this tour on really in acclimating the kids into the young student athletes into the diversity of Nashville. They'll visit the Hispanic community. They'll visit Islamic Center of Nashville. I almost died when I found out they're going to come here. It's a dream for me, so I always look forward to it. They did it 2 years, and I'm looking forward to next summer to see the athletes who we end up seeing throughout the years to support, go support them as they play. So, several in the MLB, Darius Garland, of course, he's going to be probably a lottery pick and so forth. And then the funnest thing I got to partake in was Jordan Matthews. Everyone knows him. I guess he's the all-time leading receiver in yardage in the SEC, and not just Vanderbilt. So he runs a charity event that supports the YWCA's Amend Initiative, something I'm involved with engages men to end domestic violence, engaging men in the conversation. It's an preventive education initiative that does engage men and boys to help end domestic violence against girls and women. And so they had the charity event last summer, and I had just come from open heart surgery. Shane Foster, a good friend of mine, all-time leading scorer for Vanderbilt basketball, wish we had him. He visited me the second day I got out of the hospital and at home. And he said, I know what you're going to ask me about that game. You're not playing, because he had invited me. I know you want to play, but we'll have you do the opening pitch. So did I consult Josh? He's the all-time best pitcher for Hillsborough. At least I claim that, because a lot of history I know about Josh. But yeah, I was like, man, how do you pitch a ball? Overhand? Then I realized once I got there, it was underhand. So I had the video, but I lost it. And maybe it's good I lost it because it went way over Sidney Campbell's head when I pitched it. But so diversity among Muslims in the U.S., so Muslims in Nashville, we'll cover a little bit about that. So diversity is, it's celebrated in our faith. And I know this is something that under David Williams, may God bless him, you know, what he did with the university under his leadership when it came to diversity and the student athlete and the whole institution. So there's a verse in the Quran, and I'll recite it in Arabic so you have an idea how it sounds. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. O mankind, we created you from a single male and female and made you into nations and tribes so that you may get to know one another. So the purpose of our diversity is really an educational opportunity to learn about others who are different, step out of our comfort zone, learn about people who are different based on ethnic background, religious backgrounds, gender, you name it, race. So it's complete opposite to racism. And so it's very important in our faith to really celebrate diversity and learn about each other. And there are other many teachings. Muslims in Nashville and America. So sometimes people think we're new to the country. Yeah, we have a lot of Muslims who are new, and we have a lot that have been here pre-Columbus time. And these are just some piece of history from 1312, as early as 1312. About 30% who came as slaves were actually Muslims. And then this mosque you're sitting in was founded in 1979. So my father, a few uncles, the Egyptian lady got together and said, let's form a constitution of the Islamic for starting a new mosque. And after they formed the constitution, they started fundraising, and all of a sudden Cat Stevens found out about it from England, or better known as that time Yusuf Islam, or also known as. And so he donated $5,000, and then out of $30,000, that was a lot of money, and he came right before they opened this mosque in '79. So they still didn't have a location, and he hung out for a day. It's like, I don't know, maybe hanging out with LeBron for a day or Justin Timberlake, whatever it is. It was pretty cool. I hope that happens to me before I leave any leadership position here. But so what happened, he donated another $15,000, but after the house was purchased, so with that they bought the adjacent property, which if he gave us just a few more thousand, we would have had Frothy Monkey. And so then the community started growing. And in 1989, so that's a picture of Cat Stevens, a few pictures from way back in the day. Before that, actually being Vanderbilt University, I do like to share our journey. We were at Jefferson Street for a small stint, but Vanderbilt University, we claim that that's actually our heritage, because we prayed at St. Augustine Chapel for a while, our Friday service, and then they used to call it the Afro House, or the Black Cultural Center. Black Cultural Center, right? Yeah, so I remember as a kid going there for at least 4 years, and when we were off from school, we'd go there and pray our Friday service around 1 o'clock. So Vanderbilt has a significant role in our history. And then this mosque was redeveloped before it became a trend here and fancy thing to do, redevelop homes here. In 1989, our leadership decided we're going to stay here, because there was some talk about let's move somewhere that's safer. And I remember hearing that as a young adult kid, and I was glad. I know my father took a big stance on staying where people lived and not try to go in a fancy neighborhood. And then Cat Stevens, he finally visited us in 2016 during his 50th anniversary tour. And I had actually met him at Muhammad Ali's funeral. So we're talking about Olympians. And that's a picture right there of the funeral. And there's And there's Cat Stevens right there. And on the right, in Muhammad Ali's funeral. And so I saw him. Introduced myself when I told him I'm my dad's son, if that makes sense. He knows my dad, so he was really excited and took my card. And so he said, I visited the center yesterday and found a great openness to share the message of unity, love, and peace, which I discovered. I'm proud the center in Nashville has become a beacon for understanding and sharing spiritual values. It was obviously money well spent. And then demographics, we have about 7 million maybe. It's not a huge number, maybe 2% of the United States population among that are Muslims. Over 63,000 in Tennessee, over about 40,000 in Nashville. Statistically around the country, 1/4 African Americans, 1/4 Asians, 1/4 Arabs, 1/4 the rest. But in Nashville it's different. It's almost 1 in every 2 Muslim is Kurdish, because we have about 15,000 or more in Nashville. And Somalians is the second largest. We do hold several annual events every year. One's our annual Black History Month. Our 5th one was supposed to take place actually on February 25th, and I'll share the story. So we do a topic that one was on Don't Count the Days, but Make the Days Count by Muhammad Ali. These are just people who visit, about 100 to 200, and we'll have topics that are shared by different faith members or community members. Shane Foster was one of the panelists a year ago. And then we give an award to someone we feel like has really helped open the doors for others. We call it Breaking Down the Barriers Award, who had worked was engaged in civil rights movement. Our previous year went to Kwame Lillard, a freedom rider. But this year was going to go to David Williams. And it's really, I mean, I'm grateful that he knew about it literally 5 days before he passed away. I think it was Monday. I had emailed him, and so he was going to be our honoree. And just to share, y'all know about David Williams, what a legend he was, a solid human being he was. And so before I share that email, this is the first one right after my surgery. So I had a sudden open heart surgery. Actually, it's a year ago today. Was my first day home from the hospital. A year ago in a week, I was under the knife. So I had a bacterial infection. Later I found out almost killed me. So thank God I survived it. And he sent me this email, and I love to share this. Not everyone has seen this. He said, Rashed, my good friend, it came to my attention that you have been experiencing some health issues. Sorry to hear this, and I do not want to bother or contribute to any problems, but I did want to reach out to you to tell you we are thinking of you and including you in our prayers. Get well, and please let me know if we can help out in any way. I know Allison has delivered some things to you, but your friends in athletics and the Williams family are here to help you in your recovery. Once again, thinking of you, my friend, and wishing a speedy recovery so you can get back to the baseball games. We are here, anchor down. That meant the world to me. I was receiving a lot of nice cards, emails, phone calls, visits. Remember Josh coming by. And I'm actually in the process of writing an article for Nashville Fit magazine about recovery and physical and emotional healing. And so just tying in my experience and what it meant when you had community support, what that does to you. Really, I never felt depressed once. I always felt positive. And this is a huge example, just of one of quite a number, but in context of all of you here. And those who know him probably can hear him saying that, because that's the type of human being he was. Now, I did send him the email that Monday, and he replied, thanks so much for your kind email. I am both humbled and honored to be your honoree this year. So kind of you. Gail and I are planning a trip, which was scheduled to begin on the evening of February 28th, because February 28th was the date we were looking at. Clearly, March 2 does not work, and while we are planning on leaving on the 28th, I can see if we can reschedule our departure. If no other date, such earlier in the week can work. Let me know and I will see about a later departure. Of course, I moved our date based on his schedule, but he was so humble that he was willing to change his departure date just to accommodate coming here. So anyhow, annual diversity brunch, we just had that. It has like maybe 600 to 1,000 attendees, food from over 33 countries. It just took place last Saturday. We honor someone with our Beyond Borders Award, which goes to someone who's worked towards inclusion and justice for all. Renata Soto, these are several Avi posted. This year was the YWCA, Pat Shea and Sharon Robertson, the former and present CEO. Ramadan class and dinner, we do that. If you ever want to try out some dinner, come. We do this similar class, but not this class. We don't talk about athletics, but partnerships. These are many examples throughout the city and the neighborhood work. And of course, we're talking about sports and athletics. Rock and Roll Marathon's coming here in 2 weeks, so we usually participate and volunteer for 20 to 30,000. So let's talk about Islam, fitness, and sports. There's a lot when we look back that didn't realize that you read it, you like to play sports, but then there are things that sort of tie into healthy living, lifestyle, meditation. But Prophet Muhammad said a strong believer is better than a weak believer. And strength, of course, is both physical, but also the way you tackle, the courage you take. I was reading some more deep meaning into that. So it's important to take care of basically take care of your body. The right of the child is one of obliging his father to teach him. Sorry, I'm writing this terribly. I just wrote this thing a few minutes ago. So him writing, swimming, and archery. Basically, it's an obligation on the parents to teach 3 things: education, writing, swimming, and archery. I mean, this is one of many things, but it's important. Just the emphasis is on fitness and sports and accuracy. Racing, he would spend time racing against his wife. We're talking about racing. Sometimes his wife would win, sometimes he would win. Prophet Muhammad practiced wrestling and defeated a famous wrestler. Horseback riding was emphasized, and there's so many things on healthy lifestyle. Basics of Islam, 6 articles of faith. We're going to zoom through these really quick, and then we'll hit on those 4 Olympians. So Islam and Muslim. So Islam means peaceful, willing submission to the will of God. It's derived from the root word salam, which means peace. And so a Muslim is a person who willingly submits to God and finds peace. And so I love to share this banner. It's called Celebrate Peace. And it was gifted to us back right after 9/11. 9/11 is considered one of the most tragic events that occurred on U.S. soil in recent history. And so as Muslims, we're grieving just like anyone else. But all of a sudden, some people started painting us with the same paintbrush and thinking that we're equally responsible for the crimes carried out by these 19 criminals who happen to be Muslims. So it was a time of fear. If you're Muslim or look like a Muslim, a Sikh person was killed, murdered, because someone took it in their own hands based on their hatred and took it out on that person. They thought they were killing a Muslim. So I like to share this little icebreaker. Sorry. And it's a little teaser, and it's going to test your knowledge of which one is a Muslim.
I have heard that Nashville has the largest Kurdish.
It has the largest Kurdish, that's true. About over 15,000, some estimate 17,000. Okay, so diversity comes in many forms, and for Muslims, a lot of times we're painted with the same paintbrush. You look at one person, you think that's a Muslim, and that person may not be. And so which Oz is a Muslim? Ozzy Osbourne or Dr. Oz? Dr. Oz. Anyone beg to disagree?
Dr. Oz.
Yeah, I like Ozzy Osbourne better because he reminds me of sports and the way games start with the crazy train. But which of these 2 rockets is a Muslim? I have some trick questions, by the way. Hakeem. What about James Harden? He looks like a lot of Muslims I know, but he's not. Or at least not that I know of. Okay, which of these 2 U.S. Olympians is a Muslim? Simone Biles or Ibtihaj Muhammad? That's a good answer, but it's actually Ibtihaj Muhammad. Unfortunately, she's holding a sword, so now I have to now explain the whole sword thing. So which of these 2 World Cup soccer players is Muslim? The one's prostrating or looking up in the air?
The one on the left.
Yeah, that's the way we pray. And he's a devout Christian from South America, the other one. Actually, this is a good Vanderbilt trivia. Which of these 2 Vandy corners is a Muslim? Trey Herndon or T-Mac?
What are their names?
Torrin McGaster or T-Mac, Willie Trey Herndon. One plays for the Jaguars. He got a lot of playing time in England last...
Which one plays with the Jaguars?
Trey. He's from Chattanooga. The one to the right.
So he's a cornerback with Jalen Ramsey?
Yeah. He doesn't start, but he was a undrafted free agent. Not undrafted. I forgot, how does football go? I'm getting mixed up with basketball. Yeah, undrafted free agent, and they love his work ethics. And he had, I think, the most deflections during his senior year, or one of the most in terms of passes. Actually, it's a trick question. They're both. Yeah. That's how I got to know them. I didn't know them before, but once I was introduced. Which comedian is a Muslim? Dave Chappelle. Which of these two Santas does not work during December?
The one on the left.
Yeah, his name's Yusuf Estes. And which of these two women is a Muslim?
Neither. No, the one on the left.
Both. One is former Miss America in 2010 from Michigan. Someone said they're from Michigan, right? And then she was with the White House, obviously not this administration. And finally, now talking about administration, which of these two presidents, I'll say ex-presidents or former presidents, is a Muslim? One's former president of this big nation, and then another one of this little mosque. Yeah. Don't say Obama, because there's some haters that say that, but no, he's Christian and I'm Muslim. He spoke at Casa Azafran on immigration, this reform in 2014. Renata, the director, invited me, and I didn't know what I was getting into. It was like incredible. But after it was over, we took our photo ops until I think after my picture, they realized this might be a security threat. So they said no more picture, but luckily I got mine. And never mind, we'll go back to the presentation. So you got the idea. There's a lot of diversity among Muslims.
Any more boroughs in here? I'm one.
Are you in Hillsborough? Wow.
71.
Cool. So we got 3 boroughs. So Hillsborough Boroughs is their student council gifted us with that banner, and that was to say, hey, we know you have nothing to do with these crimes. We're all neighbors, and it meant the world to us. And that's what education, and when you get to know each other, you can really impact society in a positive way, and alleviate people's problems. We don't know what people are going through. It could be mental health, problems, abuse and so forth. But when someone brings that human touch to things, it just makes the world like the best place for a person who's suffering. And so 6 articles of faith, I'll briefly go through these. We believe in a God, we refer to Allah. So Allah is just the word for God. It's just like Dios in Spanish, and we believe He's one, He's almighty, He's most compassionate. We believe in angels, we believe in revelations. God sent the Torah, Psalms, Gospel. We believe the Quran to be the final revelation. We believe in prophets. God created Adam, Noah, Abraham, Jacob, Moses, Jesus. We believe Muhammad to be the final prophet. We believe in a day of judgment that we'll be raised up after we die, back to life, and we'll be held accountable for everything we did in this life. The reward and punishment comes in the form of a heaven and a hell. We believe in a divine decree that everything happens by the will of God. So we lost I think 18 SEC games in a row. So you sort of you're frustrated and hey, I bought season tickets this year. I was ready to watch them win the national championship. And then after you go through all this craziness, you realize it's God's will. And then just like every year with the Titans in January, hopefully this year will be different, and we'll say it's God's will in a positive way. 5 pillars of Islam, these are the foundations by which we live our lives. Testimony that there's no God except Almighty God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. We pray 5 times a day, charity, and fasting and pilgrimage. We're going to cover those 4 a little bit in context of 4 the speakers we'll be talking about. So let's now hit the main part on Olympics, understanding Islam, diversity, and challenges through 4 U.S. Olympians. So these are I didn't get to speak with all. I did speak with 2 of them. The third one communicated sort of via the father, but we'll share these. I asked them, some of them, share your story. As a Muslim, do you feel like you were embraced by your teammates and U.S. national team on the spot? Or was there anything you had to do to help break down cultural diversity barrier? Please share any experience you'd like to share regarding your observation on diversity. What was that feeling like, seeing people all over the world competing against each other? Did you see any political agendas carried over to the Olympics, having either positive or negative impact, war, equality, oppression? So, and we'll start with Ibtihaj Muhammad. Of course, she was, I think, a bronze medalist in 2016, Rio de Janeiro. And she's known for fencing. And just a few things like America, this is a quote, "America is all that I know. I feel American down to my bones." And she was the first U.S. Muslim Olympian to compete in what we call a hijab. And so these are questions that I got from the New York Times. Since I didn't get to interview her directly, she was out this week. I contacted someone who knew her. But I found almost, this article would have hit stuff I would have asked anyway. So what are the biggest misconceptions about female Muslim athletes that you are trying to dispel? And this is Ibtihaj. She said, "We exist. For the Olympic team, for the United States, I've changed the narrative for the Muslim community in the way that we've been perceived. And if you take that a step further and look at the way Muslim women see themselves, these young girls who haven't had anyone at this level of sport do that on the world stage, compete at the highest level of sport. To do that is changing the way Muslim women think about themselves and perceive themselves." And it's just like any minority group. Like when you see someone who really models the way you live, your lifestyle, and you see that person or your race, you know, you see, or ethnicity, you see them succeeding, it really motivates more people to say, hey, I can be like that person. So she was voted as 100, I think, top influential people 3 years ago. And it wasn't a Muslim. I was like, at first I read that, is that 100 influential Muslims? No, it was just people, and I found that very interesting. So let's talk, when we talk about the headdress she wears, it's called a hijab. And so she was the first woman to wear a hijab in the Olympics for United States, not around the world. And so of these 5 women, can you guess how many are Muslims? Left?
3.
No, only the one to the right. She was the president of the largest Muslim society in the United States, Ingrid Maxson. She's actually Jewish. She's a nun. That's a depiction of Mother Mary, and there's Mother Teresa or Saint Teresa. So the thing is, Islam we don't consider as a new religion. You know, Judaism had the monotheistic faith, and so we're just a continuation. We just believe it's the final revelation. So a lot of the teachings are really coming from previous revelations. And it's an act of faith showing obedience towards God, to be respected and recognized as a woman of faith. Men will tend to have a beard, long shorts past the knees, thanks to Michael Jordan, and a kufi, skull cap, so we wore that. It's like the Jewish yarmulke. Now, women and men are equal before God. There's a verse that talks about equality, that no matter if a good deed, charity, whatever that may be, prayer, is done by a female or a male, they get equal rewards in the 16th chapter. And there are many verses that highlight that. So it's not like the inequity we have where women get paid maybe 80 cents to the dollar of men for the same job. Right towards education, men and women are required, both men and women are required to gain an education in Islam. Right to vote. And 3 largest Muslim countries, Muslim-dominated or majority countries, have elected their head of state as a female. I was born in Bangladesh, moved here when I was 1. So even the country, it's the 8th largest country in the world, their head of state has been female. 2 different parties over the last 2 decades. Right to receive a dowry upon marriage, maintain their maiden names, no forced marriages. Prophet Muhammad said anyone who has 3 daughters and provides for them, clothes them, and shows mercy to them will definitely enter the garden. So when he was born, daughters were being buried alive, and so he changed that culture of violence, disrespect towards women. There are a lot of teachings. Actually, with the YWCA MEND, I gave quite a few, actually a lot of sermons on compassionate treatment towards women, and based on the teachings here. And it's all about changing that culture where people feel like women, you know, are less than men, or mistreat them or abuse them. Because like in the United States, 1 in 4 women are victims of domestic violence. Every day 3 women are losing their lives to domestic violence. So what can we do to change that culture? I mean, men have to be involved. It can't be just a women's issue. And so we've started sharing this, and there's some verses in the Quran that condemns that choice of living with grief when you have a daughter or burying her. Prophet Muhammad said, the best of you are those who are best to their wives. So Ibtihaj Muhammad was asked, I think people will find most surprising about your story is the amount of resistance you faced from Ed Corfanti, your coach, and teammates on Team USA. Why do you think they were so resistant to your success? What's interesting, when I read this, and of course I was going to interview her, it was very interesting to find after interviewing Hakeem Olajuwon, who has a totally different narrative, or Issam Hamido, who played in the Olympics in 1988 with Egypt and then was on the national teams here, and then the Paralympics in 2000 and 2004. He has a different narrative. So it's important to just see these diverse views. She said it's hard to put your finger on it. A lot of it has to do with fencing being an individual sport. It's a very competitive, contentious environment. There's a limited number of spots on the team. For me, that initial pushback was not there until I started to win. And it's kind of, you're different. Let's ask weird questions about hijab and prayers. But they were really more about out of pure ignorance than hatred. Really silly things like, do you use a magic carpet to pray? Stuff like that. Microaggressions. I had to endure. But then I realized that as I started to climb and do better, the energy changes because then you're seen as a threat. My teammates would do really silly things like not telling me there was a team practice. Then it became very clear, we don't want you here. And having to navigate that space, unfortunately, can be common for athletes who are among the first in their sport. And I found it interesting because Andrew has, written great books on with Perry Wallace and things that came out like, everyone thought it was glorious, right? And what he was going through and suffering and people not speaking and standing up for his rights the way that you would want them. So when the teammates, although they may be good people, but acceptance and that extra responsibility of looking after each other is so important. When I read that, I was just thinking about when we watched, was it Triumph? And what the players later realized, maybe they should have done something more, not realizing he was so isolated inside. And so, same thing, it's a minority, it's someone breaking down the barriers, the first at their field, and sometimes there are some pushbacks. So Muslim athletes, it's no different, that there will be a diversity of some that have to break down some big barriers. And then politics, she said, she did go to Duke, and she said, you can either continue to operate as normal as an athlete and pretend that you have not changed, or you can use your platform to change minds and change your situation. After Olympics, you write in your book that you received death threats. Was that your first one? And she said, no, I've had quite a few. Did that start after the Olympics? I had them before the games. The interesting thing about that is the United States Fencing Association and the Olympic Committee didn't take them as seriously as I thought they should. They would send them to me, which to me plays a part in my mental state as an athlete. I don't think that it was helpful at all. If anything, as a national governing body, I would hope that the USA fencing would want to protect me, and I never felt that from them. It just always seemed like a burden to even have to deal with it. And what more of a burden is there than having a death threat made against you? And I found that interesting. So she carries a sword, and so there's this misconception Islam was spread by the sword. And of course there were wars and battles, not going to deny that. But Mahatma Gandhi read his biography of Muhammad, and he said, I became more than convinced that it was not the sword that won a place for Islam in those days in the scheme of life. It was the rigid simplicity, the utter self-effacements of the Prophet, the scrupulous regards for his pledges, and so forth. And he said, these, not the sword, carried everything before them and surmounted every obstacle. And so that leads to jihad, this whole thing about sword and fighting and being violent. Jihad does not mean holy war. The word for war is harb, and is a word that Muhammad even told not to name yourselves after. And jihad just means to strive, struggle, or exert yourself. It's a word actually that is to be celebrated for us, but nowadays if you say jihad, people get scared, so we're like, no, we're not going to say that. But it's that struggle to improve yourself, to get an education. Everyone who goes to Vanderbilt is doing jihad every day, but not getting arrested for it. Jihad to raise your child, the sacrifice of a firefighter or a police officer, courage of a soldier. So let's talk about war and peace. So first 13 years of Prophet Muhammad's prophethood, around the age of 40. Muslims were being tortured, boycotted for 3 years, killed, and they didn't once resort to suicide bombing, saying, I'm just going to kill some people, it's hopeless, or take hostages. What happened, after 13 years, they peacefully migrated, became refugees of their time, went from Mecca to Medina, were welcomed with open arms, but shortly thereafter, war was waged against them. And so God finally revealed that you have to fight back. If someone wages war, you can't run away. And he said if you didn't do so, then the risks would have been that churches, synagogues, and mosques in which the name of God were mentioned would be pulled down. Meaning that an attack, we hear the cliche, an attack on one faith is an attack on all. So our teaching in the 22nd chapter really symbolizes that. And then when it comes to war and peace, Muhammad said, and this is a clip I got, if ISIS ever read the Quran, they would know too. Of course, ISIS to Islam is like KKK to Christianity. They violate every rule in the book. And so Muhammad said during war, don't cut a tree, don't kill a woman, child, sick person, old people, monk or priest, don't destroy a church or a temple, don't disfigure the dead, destroy a building, don't kill an animal except for eating, don't kill those who surrendered or who ran away, don't enforce Islam, and be good to the prisoners and feed them. And so those are important rules. Islam and terrorism and public safety. So people asked you, is this terrorism condemned? Of course, God says that if anyone killed a person, it would be as though he killed all of humanity, and if anyone saved a life, it would be as though he saved all of humanity. So every life is sacred. But more than that, Islam sets a higher responsibility for Muslims, that you just don't not kill people, don't be a terrorist, but also you have to make sure others are safe. Prophet Muhammad said, part of a branch of one's faith is to remove something injurious from a path where people could get injured. So if I see anyone in harm's way, I have a responsibility to make sure that person is removed from harm's way. And so you drive down the highway, you see a flat tire, you swerve, and you avoid the accident. First thing, call 615-862-8600, because the person next behind you may not be as fortunate. So you're thinking about how others, not just your safety, but others can be safe. That's why I love the YWCA Amend initiative, because you're being proactive about how can you save lives, how can you save women from being injured, battered every 15 seconds, you know? You got to create some awareness. You have to talk to boys and young men and change that culture. So it's to protect women. Hakeem Olajuwon, the second guy I interviewed. So I met him in 1998. Of course, he was part of that Fly Slamma Jamma team. And that's a picture of me and my daughter, and we went to watch him play play the Hawks. It was on a Friday. So I took Friday off from work, and then we went for Friday service. I had an idea that he's probably going to be in Friday service since it's Friday evening game, everything I heard about him. So I was prepared. I had my Hakeem Olajuwon 34 shoes, and he charged only $34 for them those days. And so in the back I sat because I had my daughter. I didn't want her to cry and make noise. And so as soon as the prayer was finished, I noticed he was in the middle because he was the tallest person. I made a beeline to the shoe rack, and as I was putting my shoes, I said, hey, Hakeem, hi, and I don't know what to say, but so I told him I have my Hakeem shoes, and he was just so nice. He laughed, and then I said, can we take a picture? So as we got out, we took that picture. Out of 700 attendees, not a single soul came to him. I was the only one who, I don't know if anyone else identified him, but there are a lot of people from the African continent, from Sudan, that are tall there, so maybe they thought he was just another tall guy. And so after 21 years, I met him in Houston where my in-laws live. After emailing Andrew, like, I want to make sure I tailor my presentation properly, and he gave me some ideas, which I appreciate. And I was leaving Houston, I was like, dang, can I interview Hakeem? He played in the Olympics '96. I reached out to my relative, and then he said he goes to this mosque in the morning if he's in town. I turn on the radio and I hear Hakeem's at the Golden State Rockets game. I said, that's it. I'm waking up at 5:30, getting there early, and lo and behold, he came. to pray, and after the prayer, I introduced myself. We spent 1 hour just chit-chatting. I praised Vanderbilt. I said, you got to know about this university, what they do. And then I told him I didn't have time to I didn't even know what I was going to interview him for. So I told him, he gave me his number and email. He said, just call me when you want, and we'll do the interview, which we just did on Monday. So he spent a half an hour on the phone. And so I'll share a few things. What did he say? So, as a Muslim with Nigerian ethnicity, do you feel like you were embraced by your teammates and U.S. national team on the spot? Or was there anything you had to do to help break down cultural diversity barrier? And for him, it was different. He had just won 2 NBA championships. He was the dream. He didn't get to play in the dream team because he was Nigerian in 1992. But he was a U.S. Citizen by 96, so this was the second dream team. And so he said you had to be bold on your principles and people would respect you for it. For daily prayers, not only would they provide a room, but also provide security by the door. So you hear one person is being more suppressed and there's like a lot of emotional stress. And here's a person who is at the top of the world and he's, he lives up to his principles as well, but he has it's a different atmosphere for an athlete of his stature. And so when it comes to prayers, he's an observant Muslim. Let's talk about prayer. So we pray 5 times a day. And first thing we pray before the sun rises, during the noontime, afternoon, sunset, and nighttime. Each of these prayers may take about 5 minutes to perform. And so first thing we perform ablution, wash our hands, face, and feet, and then we face in the direction of Mecca. Mecca, there's this cubicle building that was built by, Abraham way back in the day as a sanctuary, a place where people would pray. And so first thing we do, we say Allahu Akbar, God is greatest, and then we begin with the opening chapter of the Quran. And the Quran has 114 chapters, and the very first verse that was revealed is Iqra, to read. And that falls in the 96th chapter, so it's not in chronological order of revelation. And so the opening chapter just says, in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all thanks and praise belong to God, Lord of the worlds, the most compassionate and merciful, and then we ask for guidance and help. And then and if you notice, the words for compassion and mercy are used 4 times, and anger once. So there's a big theme on compassion and mercy in Islam. It appears 192 times in the Quran, and only 17 times the words anger appear. And then we recite any other verses from the Quran, and then we bow down. Since this is like the ideal group to share athletics. So if you want to know how bowing down looks, you know Tony Romo, right? So a few years ago, he lost his starting job to Dak Prescott, and guess what he was doing? He was bowing down and probably praying for his starting job, which his prayer wasn't answered. So that's exactly how it looks. And then we get back up, and then we prostrate. Prostration looks like, I guess anyone would do that if they had a pick 6 against Tom Brady. And this was like 5 years ago, Hussein Abdullah. And so he prostrated. And of course, as a Titans fan, anytime Tom Brady's intercepted, you're happy, because I think he knocked us out 4 times with the last playoffs. Once when we should have made the playoffs in 2006. Anyhow, and then we get back up, we prostrate, and then we sit. And no, we get back up. That completes 1 cycle of prayer, or like in yoga, 1 vinyasa. And then we repeat the prayers. And then during prostration, we'll supplicate to God. And then once we complete the prayer, we say peace on both sides, and that completes the prayer. So it's like people talk about mindfulness, meditation. It's a big thing these days, and that's what we do. And it does keep you well grounded, this type of prayer. It's like a yoga session without, it's pretty cool. And so our big day of prayer is Friday congregational prayer. So of course, the Jews took Saturdays, Christians took Sundays, so we were left with 5 days. So we came up with TGIF, I think. And so that replaces the noon prayer. And then, so here's some comparisons. And I like to say, not just comparing yoga, but also gymnastics. And I gave this analogy. I give sermon every so often when our imam's not here or at the university. And so gymnastics, to me, makes the parallel between gymnastics and prayer. So there's a teaching by Muhammad that said, though a man performs the whole prayer, he may get no credit for half of it, a third, a quarter, a fifth, sixth, or 10th. A man gets credit only for that part of his prayer of which he is conscious. And I was thinking, with the Olympics, gymnastics, you're getting like these points, fractions taken off, and you have to be super focused and concentrating, and your performance has to be perfect, right? So our prayers, a lot of times we pray and thinking like we're just going through the rituals and just zooming through them, and I've completed, that's a check mark, I completed my obligation, but we may not get any credit for it. And that connection, I've shared it with the congregation when it was Olympics. I said, like, we need to be as super focused as the Olympians are when they do gymnastics, because you don't want to lose you don't want to get 6 credits, only a sixth of your prayer rewards. You want to get the full reward, right? And then Hakeem Olajuwon, please share any experiences you'd like to share regarding your observation on diversity. What was that feeling like, seeing people all over the world competing? And he said, what was fascinating was the diversity of athletes competing in diverse sports at the highest level. It makes one become global citizens. But then, this is interesting, he said, however, there was still lacking, and I want to make sure, these are based on my notes. I didn't have a recorder because I can record from my phone while talking. So these, I don't want to claim these exact quotes, but pretty much what he summarized. He said, it was lacking more diversity in participants from many countries, right? Because they're qualifiers. You don't just, everyone gets to play. Where there may be a lack of resources that could be invested into training and proper facilities. Other countries that have invested more bore the fruits of their labors. If some underdeveloped nations had the resources to invest in athletes, they could also be more competitive. And I gave an example. Bangladesh, they have these bicycle riders called rickshaw, and they have 3 wheels. It's like a big tricycle, but like a bicycle tricycle. And they carry passengers in the back. I always thought, when I was a kid, I said, if they had the proper training, they could be the next Greg LeMond or whoever and win these, Tour de France. But Bangladesh, underdeveloped country, they don't have the resources. But Hakeem was also saying, also the country has to be intentional on, making that a priority as well. And United States has done a great job in that. Hajj and Olympics, we were talking about the comparison of performing the pilgrimage to Mecca and attending the Olympics. So Olympics, and I've made this analogy quite a few times, but what was neat hearing it when we brought up this topic, hearing his perspective, because he actually attended both. And he said, it's a beautiful scene, but he said with Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, what's even more beautiful is that there's no qualification. Everyone can send people from countries. So you really get to see a whole diverse set of people from all over the world. And he did give compliments to United States, and so did my last subject, interviewee, for U.S. for truly having diversity. Because if you are a U.S. citizen, doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, you are a U.S. citizen and you're competing for the Olympics. And we do have I don't know the number, but quite a number of those who had come from different heritage. United States is like that by nature, whether it's first generation, second, third, fourth. We all have some ethnic heritage, mostly, of course, native Indians. So to go back, and so there's this, we all come together. And if you saw, this was, I saw this on, I think, the Daily Show or something about France. And there was there was some racism against soccer players in Europe. And if you heard about the chanting, I mean, it just makes you sick into your heart when you hear about it and watch it, and just open racism. And there was this comment about France and their African players who are African heritage, the acceptance level. And it was just a Daily Show thing, but it was interesting, the exchanges of talks, and then how the guy for Daily Show started praising U.S., that once you're on that U.S. national team, you are United States. It doesn't matter like what your heritage is. So that's something, I think, despite the challenges, we heard unfortunate challenges with Ibtihaj, that exists, no doubt, and has to get better. But there's a lot of pride to take that we have through the U.S. Olympics. So examples, here's So when we talk about Hajj, pilgrimage to Mecca, it's performed once in a lifetime. And if you notice, some of these requirements, 5 pillars, require you have to be healthy. You have to do, it's like an exercise. Prayer is like an exercise. Fasting, which you know what? Okay. So pilgrimage, you have to be, whoever is healthy enough to perform it and has the means is required. Look, if I'm sick, last year after my open heart surgery, I wouldn't be required, although I performed it way back in the day, in 1993. And I do have a beautiful story on diversity on there. So after Vanderbilt, I went to Georgia Tech, completed my master's. I had a teaching assistantship. So I was earning money, and I worked for IBM one summer, so I earned enough money to perform the pilgrimage to Mecca. And all of a sudden, you go there, you see people from all over the world. It's the most beautiful scene. But I met a Russian. So Russians in 1993, Josh, you remember, Andrew, they were like scary. I mean, you watch the news every day, they're about to blow us up. And then all of a sudden, you watch Rocky IV, and that's it. You're scared of Russians for life. And what was interesting that I met a Russian, of all things, he was Muslim, didn't know Russians could be Muslims. And he was the nicest person. So the thing is breaking down these barriers just through relationships and not using your if politically America or whatever country one comes from doesn't like another country, doesn't mean that the people have to be held hostage. I mean, I don't want to give too many comments on, I think it was the 1980 Olympics, we boycotted, right? I forgot all about it until talking to Hakeem Olajuwon, because one of the questions I asked about political, people bringing politics into the Olympics, and he said, politics is always there. He said, but it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. He was mentioning that, well, some people, for politicians, it's a way to bring about more peace and bridges of understanding. And I was like, wow, I never thought about it from his perspective that, politicians will use it in a positive way, and there's politicians who may use it in a negative way. But the last thing you want are the athletes to be held hostage based on, the country's politics. And because I may miss some time, I did ask about, from our last interviewee, asked where did you see politics playing? Issam Hamido, who is a world champion, has 14 medals, played in the Egyptian Olympic teams, a good friend of mine, he's a professor at TSU. And he said, one thing special about United States, and comparing to when he was in Egypt, other countries, they'll tell you what you can or can't say. He said in the United States, he was never told you can't say this or that politically. I don't know if that's across the board or through his lens, but I thought that was very interesting. The freedom of speech doesn't mean that freedom of speech is really truly freedom of speech. We've seen people stand up, Colin Kaepernick, we've seen Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, and then there's been repercussions. So it's not ideally where it is, but it's still a lot better than a lot of places around the world. And so celebration of diversity, that was one thing. Malcolm X, when he attended the pilgrimage to Mecca, he was shocked to see that people of all colors accepted him. And then Hakeem Olajuwon, we talked about political agenda. Fasting in sports, so during the 2012 Olympics, was that Seoul, I believe, Korea? No, UK. There were 3,000 Muslim athletes competing around the world among all the Olympians. And so they talked about, I found this, Abdul Muhari, Great Britain, and he was a discus thrower, and he was interviewed and said, he wasn't going to fast. So fasting, we'll talk a little bit about that, but Hakeem Olajuwon, during 1994 season, Ramadan became around March. And Ramadan is a fasting month for us. We're required to fast during the month of Ramadan. And by the way, 1980, when Ramadan fell during the Olympics, Suleiman from Tanzania, who was also a student here in the United States, won a silver medalist in the 5,000 meter run. And he was actually fasting. So different Olympians will take it different ways. I would guess to venture that majority won't fast. And there's some research and talks about the effect of fasting. And so fasting occurs during the 12th lunar month. So we follow the lunar calendar year like in Judaism. And the name of the 9th lunar month is called Ramadan. And we fast from dawn to sunset. So right now lunar calendar has about 10 to 12 days, falls 10 to 12 days shorter than the Gregorian calendar. So Ramadan keeps on shifting by 10 to 12 days. So over a 30 period, 30 years period, Ramadan will go from summer to summer, going through every season. So right now it starts early May, next year late April. And so we take a pre-dawn meal, eat and drink, and then none of that and intimate marital relations till the sun sets. But when the sun sets, we can eat, we can pig out, but we can't eat pigs. So that's how our fasting works. And then there are exemptions, the sick, the nursing, the elderly. Now, if you're a traveler, you don't have to fast. So I actually asked Hakeem Olajuwon, because I always heard about him fasting. I said, was that only when you had away games? Because when you're home, you're supposed to fast, but away you get an exemption. And by the way, with Vanderbilt athletics, my first time I utilized this exemption was 2 years ago when Vanderbilt was playing in the regionals against Clemson, and I couldn't take it any longer. Like Kyle Wright was just pitching the lights out, and I was like, Predators were about to make the Stanley Cup. I told my boys, you know, we can break our fast and travel to Clemson, and we did it. And then the thing is, we had to make up those fasts, I think 2 days, and so anyhow, he fasted on the away games too. And actually his performance during Ramadan, there was an article, of course it was already incredible, but he was even performing better. Keeps you focused and everything. And so anyhow, that's a little bit about fasting. And we'll skip this. These are just different, an article that I came across. It was very interesting about the Muslim athletes who, in 2012, from The Guardian, who are fasting, those who weren't. Majority weren't. But if you're sick, you're not supposed to fast. So after my open heart surgery, my doctor told me 6 months not to fast. First I was like, man, I hope I can, towards the end of it. But after it was done, and 6 months came in November when the days were shorter, I was like, oh good, this is easier to make up the fast now, which I just completed last month. Dr. Issam Hamido is our last guy. He won 2 gold medals with Egypt. He played in the Olympics in 1988. And then in the United States, he was brought over by a gentleman from Fisk. And then ever since then, he did his PhD from TSU, went into sports science, I think, and fitness. And so in 1988, there's a picture, White House, he got to visit. He has a cool story about how he met, the first time he also went when Bill Clinton was there, and how he met Bill Clinton twice. So all these athletes are waiting in line, and then he tells me that he meets him. It's 1 minute, and then he asks him where he's from and everything. In Egypt, he said, wow, you know, this. Bill Clinton could engage in conversations, very charismatic. So then later he exchanged his jersey or his coat, Olympic coat, blue to red and whatever. Then he decided, with a friend who wanted to exchange, then he said, let me go back. He won't recognize this different color. So he goes back and he keeps his head like he's a little embarrassed down. And then Bill Clinton said, Issam, you're back. And it's like, he was just laughing like, wow, that guy is so smart. And then he spent 10 minutes talking to him. And then the guy after him said, why were y'all talking? How did y'all get to hit that conversation so long? He said something like, we knew each other from before, meaning. So he was the first Egyptian in history to make both the Egyptian and U.S. national teams. Served on the Governor's Council of Health, served on Faculty Senate at TSU, President and CEO of Tennessee Sports for All, Professor of Human Performance and Sports Science at TSU, first Egyptian athlete to be invited to the White House. He did win 14 medals altogether. And I do want to share this story, and you're going to have to hear it from, I hope I can reach this far, because rather than me say it and him, you hear it from him, it would be even, so this is when I had no idea how I'm going to conduct this interview, but here it is. Olympian for the Egyptian team, as well as United States national team. Can you all hear it? Gold medalist, silver medalist, 14 times. Is there? Share his story about the U.S. national team. I guess y'all can hear it. Can you?
I made the U.S. national team. It was in 1999, and I went to the
Can you hear that?
Games
So he was a lifter, weightlifting, and he played volleyball. He was in the Paralympics, so he had an injury. I didn't know a lot about Paralympics till, I guess you know all about it, and I didn't, the Paralympics, but that was in 2000 and 2004, after he had his injuries, but I had a clip of that. But he was saying how he had to lead a U.S. national team to Egypt, and so people were afraid. One person had this dream, and like, going to Egypt, you know, someone's going to shoot us down, you know, all this fear that because people haven't set foot inside another country. And so, and he jokes around, he said, yeah, you better watch. I mean, he has a great sense of humor. I mean, look. Here. He said, the guy came, do you think I'll be able to walk in the street? He said, no, they're going to come and shoot you. So, I mean, he's like adding to that fear, just wanted to. But then he ended up meeting, so apparently, I think, I'm not sure, it's not, the Paralympics isn't, it's not as devastating, the injuries, from what because he's not like in a wheelchair, but it is some injuries. I wanted to follow up like more information on that, because when I was then putting everything together, I realized that was Paralympics. He mentioned it. It didn't dawn on me like the difference. But if you look on the internet, there's like, a regular volleyball team, and some of the players, I recognize their names, they had a clip of it. So what happened, he meets with his family, people are embracing them, and after it was all said and done, basically, he's like, he's saying like they're, in the Arab culture, a lot of them, they'll come, I think some like in Europe, they'll come and kiss you on the cheek, and then they're like, you know, are you like this or that? But anyhow, he was like saying, no, this is how we embrace each other. So it's like in the Greek, I think, Greek traditions, things like that. So it's just learning a different tradition. But he's, oh, did it start again? Yeah, he was telling about that guy who wanted to walk in the street, and he told him, no, they're going to shoot you. And so, but what happened after it was all said and done, they come back, and then they realize, wow, you know, Egypt, this is such a great place. They were welcomed, they met the family, and just like any human story that we all face, whether what background, faith, nationality, it's all the same. I mean, those of you who have traveled in other countries, I was born in Bangladesh, so I've seen different countries, and I see like here in the United States, different families. Every family is a family. They have, you know, the mom cares for the child, you know, whatever it is. They sit together, eat, you know, different things that you share gifts, you cry, you know, you celebrate. Every place, it's the same all over the world. So a lot of times we get a tainted picture because we haven't met people outside our boundaries, so our comfort zone. I think I'm close to finished before the cue. Sorry, I don't know how to turn him off. I'll mute him. Okay. So, very interesting gentleman, great guy. I've known him for a couple of decades, great friend. And so, now in Egypt, he said he finished, I think, 4th in swimming and 4th in lifting. So he didn't get any gold or silver there. But then a lot of these national games, he got a lot of medals. Tolerance, so that's a misconception. People tolerate each other. Well, we hate to use that word tolerate, but God said, let there be no compulsion in religion, for truth stands clear from errors. And then Muhammad said, if a female Christian is married to a Muslim, this is not to take place without her own wish. She is not to be prevented from going to her church to pray. Their churches are to be respected. In politics, as I shared, you know, that quote that he said, you know, in the United States, he didn't feel the suppression being in the Olympics team and the Paralympics where they told you, don't say this or say this. You know, we do value that opportunity or for freedom of speech, and it's very important. Versus other places in the world, they may suppress what you can say or can't say. I don't know what it's like everywhere, but he did share that, his experience. Muhammad Ali, final, of course, he did bear the torch, in the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. And I'm going to wrap it up with social justice and charity. Service, he said, don't count the days, or I'll say it like him. He said, don't count the days, but make the days count. Or he said, service to others is the rent you pay here on earth. So these are important. He was a humanitarian, not just he won the Olympics way back in '60. Of course, he was known as Cassius Clay, and then he was known as Muhammad Ali. But charity is that other pillar we didn't talk much about. You give 2.5% of your savings in a nutshell to the poor, those living in poverty. And it's also, although Christianity says the bar high with 10%, I think Judaism also has 10% according to a rabbi friend when I gave this presentation, so we're way down there. But, you know, charities, there's this word called sadaqah. Muhammad said each person's every joint must do a charity every day the sun comes up. To act justly between two people is a charity. To help a man with his mount, lifting him onto it or hoisting up his belongings onto it is a charity. A good word is a charity. Every step you take to perform prayers is a charity. And removing a harmful thing from the road is a charity. Your smile for your brother is a charity. So, you know, not just physical uplifting of every human being. And we have several hundred joints. That means every day the sun rises, we have to get engaged. And most of this is related to community service, helping others, alleviating other people's problems, both physically and emotionally. A good word. We talk about the academic success for a child is tied to the social and emotional well-being of that child. So if the kid is being abused or doesn't have food on the table, it's very hard for that kid to succeed. So emotionally, we should be there for each other and alleviating people's problems, helping a man with his mount and so forth. Smiling, we can do that all day instead of frowning and making people sad or upset. And then so I'll end it with, so when we talk about social justice, Islam is, it has 5 principles that comes to protect: religion, life, property, honor, and intellect. If any of these are violated, Islamic principles are being violated. So religion, you can say the stuff on tolerance, what we shared about you can't compel someone else, force someone to convert. There's supposed to be freedom of religion in Islam. In fact, the second leader of Islam, who was Omar, when Muslims were in Jerusalem, was invited to pray in the Church of Holy Sepulchre. He refused because he was afraid if he prayed in that church, others after him would use that as an excuse to convert churches into mosques. So he was that forward thinking. And of course we see the history of Muslims in Spain. It was known as the golden age of interfaith harmony. But honor, you can't take anyone's honor away. That's why you can't have racism, misogyny, you name it. It has to be protected. And even emotional abuse. God said, do not annoy women as to make their lives miserable. And, you know, bullying people. God said, don't ridicule, laugh, make fun of others. Do not defame one another and do not insult each other. That's from the 49th chapter. So we have to uphold people's honor and intellect. So when we come to Muhammad Ali, you know, he was a mastermind when using his mind, being a critical thinker. It's important in Islam. That's why we can't drink alcohol, because that impairs the biggest gift we have, which is our ability to think and rationale. We're actually supposed to question as well. There are verses in the Quran, and we're supposed to ponder, to reflect. Now, a lot of people don't know that about Muslims. They think we're like robots, we just do this. But actually, it really exercises the mind. And so that's why you can't have slavery. You can't have oppression. You can't have people controlling another person's brain and forcing people. So it's very important. And so intellect, that's all about Muhammad Ali. And I'll end it with here, American values consistent with Islamic values. God says, serve God and associate none with him. Show kindness to your parents and kinsfolk, and to the orphans, to the needy, to your near and distant neighbors, to the companions by your side. So that ends that presentation. And any questions? So that's as much sports I could tie into this presentation. And I'm just honored to be part of Vanderbilt Athletics. They gave me, after my surgery, they came here, Allison Wenzel with Tim Corbin sent a jersey, number 10, which is now Ethan Paul, send me a card signed by the Vandy boys, and then just emails. It believe me, I think I healed a lot quicker because of Vanderbilt. So any questions?
I've seen that little alcove they have at in basketball now. I wonder if you had that
Which one?
little alcove where I guess you can pray.
Meditation space. Oh, Vanderbilt. Okay, can't help but brag about Vanderbilt. So when Dr. Forrester was there, Mark, the university chaplain, he was working with us. I mean, we were communicating, good friend, and then he was also coordinating with the Muslim Student Association, and we mentioned one of our biggest needs as Muslim has been a prayer space. Now, when I was at Vanderbilt, I forgot, on my little bio, I don't think I did put two things there. I was like, what did I do at Vanderbilt? I wasn't as active. Like now, I wish I was at Vanderbilt again. I could be more active, but I was part of the National Society of Black Engineers. That just shows you how inclusive they are to have me in as part of that. And I was president of the Muslim Student Association for 2 years. And so we had a big prayer space in what do you call it, the social religious building, the one on Peabody campus, for years. And then when I was there, I was like, you know, we pray 5 times a day, but walking from Feathering Hall, which was called something else back then, all the way across campus, I mean, I can pray 10 times in that amount of time. And we just need to get our prayer and get back to business. And we just use like empty classrooms, stairwells, and so forth. So the minority dean, Dean Williams, she arranged the Black Cultural Center. So we came full circle from performing our Friday service prayers to there. So they created the annex right across the Director of Religious Life's office, and they aligned the carpets. They came here and visited to see how to do it best and accommodate the Muslim students, which we appreciate. And then they started taking it even farther with meditation spaces. Of course, it's not just for Muslims. Anyone who wants to meditate. I think everyone needs to meditate during Vanderbilt football games because sometimes, I mean, maybe that extra meditation. Last year, we could have gone 10-2. Really, if you think about it. But the year before, why I say meditation space, when Alabama and Georgia came to town, and that was the first year I got season tickets for football. Oh, I was shell-shocked. I was like, I mean, traumatized to see 75% of the opposing fans wore red. And but that prayer helped me at least ground myself a little bit. But I invite Christian, Jews, friends, go there and meditate. Maybe we need a lot of meditation. But so they arranged that for baseball and football, that corner. This is right under the stairwell going up to Memorial Gym. But Memorial Gym, this is the first time I got season tickets since 1981. And I was a student there. I went to the games, but 81, my dad, my older brother went to Vanderbilt. We had season tickets for 3 years, 79 to 81. And first time after 30 plus years, and in the games they say, we're celebrating, this ticket holder for 30 years. I was like, will they give an exception for someone who skipped 30 years and get celebrated? But yeah, and so I saw the space. I'd never seen, they told they're creating a space, and it was with the Souls for Souls, and it was pretty cool, but I was going to give some feedback. Might need a little curtain, or not a big curtain, but because people are wondering what the heck I'm doing there, like praying to the shoes. But anyhow, any other question or? But yeah, they've added a few more spaces, and that means the world to me because I go to I go to baseball games. I hate to go there early late because I have to catch my noon prayer and then go to the game, or leave early, miss the walk-off hit or something. I want to enjoy every moment, and that makes you really emotional. You feel like, okay, I have no worries, can chill, enjoy. Vandy boys going again, winning a game. So. Thanks, Andrew.
Well, let's hear it for Rashed again. Thank you. It was wonderful.
I didn't get to take a picture.
Yeah, we need to take a picture. Great way to end our series. Thank you to so many of you for coming to almost, I think, few of you have come to probably 14 of the 15 events, or maybe all 15. We're going to keep this going again next year. Most of you are on the mailing list. If I don't have your email address, please let me know. I'll include you on that for next year. Thanks also to OSHA for publicizing all of these events to all of your members. It's been a big part of our attendance every time, so we really, really appreciate that. And thanks for teaching us so much about Islam and,
Thank you.
and these great athletes too.
It's a huge honor, so thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.